Great. All right, I know people are still coming in. Do we feel ready to start?
Yes.
Okay.
Daniel told us to go ahead and get started.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Kristy Eldredge, and I am a faculty member at the Chicago School. And I also work in private practice here in Denver, Colorado, where I work with adult survivors of complex trauma and also counselor supervision.
And I am Dr. Rodney Harris. I also work at the Chicago School, and I live right outside Raleigh, North Carolina, and I work with children and families, mainly couples, and I work with a lot of trauma and do critical incident stress debriefing. I'm excited to have you guys with us here today.
So Dr. Harris and I were talking when proposals came out, or the call for proposals came out for this conference, talking about doing this topic because Dr. Harris has been doing this for a little while and is quite adept at it. And I have just completed my first level of training this year and started to use this approach with clients. And we're both so excited about it and have found it to be incredibly effective that, well, I mean, we both feel kind of pretty passionate about getting it out and making sure that it is a well-known approach and that we can encourage maybe others to pursue it as well. So that's a little bit about where we came from for this. Our agenda for our time together, we'll talk very briefly about trauma in the brain, because that's what this technique is rooted in, as well as the birth of Brainspotting, how this came about, what is a brain spot. That's kind of a new word. There's new language in this approach. We'll look at the different models and the different types, and of course, invite discussion and questions and case examples. We'll kind of weave those in throughout. Oh my gosh, you can see my dog in the background climbing on top of his kennel. So give me 1 second. Oh my goodness. Let me advance the slide and okay. He just apparently wants to be part of the presentation too. So this theory, like I said, or this technique is rooted in trauma, and especially looking at the neurobiological aspects of trauma. So when we talk about trauma, we're talking about anything that overwhelms our nervous system, our brain, to the degree that we can't process the information in the way that we would process other information that comes through our daily life. And because it overwhelms our system, it leaves the pieces of it frozen. And we'll talk in the future of the presentation about these little time capsules. But where animals and mammals, you might see videos of them in the wild after a scary incident, kind of shaking their body and shaking it off. As humans, we can do that to a degree, but not as well as those animals. And in humans, it gets stuck. It gets stuck in our midbrain. So when we get triggered, we're kind of right back into that trauma, because it's like it has instantly thawed and we are right there in trauma time. So this technique is trying to access that part of our brain where that frozen material is stored, so that we have a chance to reprocess it the way our nervous system is able to do. So one phrase that is used in this theory is what's in the brain is in the body, and what's in the body is in the brain. And one fact in the Brainspotting material that I just love is a reminder that the brain is a body part. Sometimes we forget that and we separate brain and body, or mind and body. But the brain is a body part. They are all connected. And so a lot of the information we get in this approach is body-based. It's listening to our clients' bodies and watching our clients' bodies to see what gets activated, and utilizing that to guide the reprocessing process. So with the discovery of brain spotting, so Dr. David Grand is the person who has created this model. He was an EMDR expert for a long time. And if you're not familiar with EMDR, that stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And that's also a brain-based trauma reprocessing technique that has lots of empirical evidence, very effective. I believe both Dr. Harris and I are trained in EMDR as well. And so he was doing this approach for a long time. And what EMDR does is it activates both sides of the brain, what we call bilateral stimulation, to help reprocess trauma material. So often we do that by having the client watch our fingers go back and forth as they think about a particular trauma issue or memory. So he was working with an ice skater, 16-year-old ice skater, and she was great in practice, but she didn't do so well in competition, and she couldn't master this one trick, the triple loop that she was trying to master. He was targeting that with EMDR, and she was tracking his finger. And what he noticed is that her eyes wobbled and froze at a particular spot. And so what he did was just kind of follow his instincts and held her gaze at that spot instead of continuing the back and forth. And what happened was that all kinds of trauma material was accessed, kind of showed up. And started pouring out. And when we're talking about pouring out, we're noticing emotions, tears, maybe memories showing up, images. Like it's sort of like a series of waves that happens when these things show up. So they had been doing EMDR for a year, on a weekly basis, EMDR 90-minute sessions. And they had processed a lot of stuff. But what they were realizing is that when he just held her gaze, all this stuff came back up, including new stuff that was connected that she didn't realize was connected. And she was able to reprocess it kind of right there in that instant. So he was perplexed why, these weekly meetings for a year that had been doing all this processing now led to new material that hadn't come out in those sessions, but also struck that this resolution kind of happened so fast and so much deeper than what he was noticing with the EMDR. And so they do this session, and she calls him the next day after practice and says, "Hey, I nailed it. I nailed my triple loop," and she never had an issue with the triple loop again. So that's just kind of an inspiring story to say how his experience with EMDR led to the adaptation of that approach into this approach. So we'll start to go into this a little bit more. So Dr. Harris, do you want to jump in at all? I'm kind of hogging all the slides. That maybe
yeah, definitely. I don't mind. And so one piece of what Dr. Grand noticed is particularly this eye-brain connection. And one note that I like to make is that the eye and the brain are connected. So the eye stem and the brain are connected. And eventually we're going to talk a little bit about that. He began to look for how that as he held that gaze, particularly, he noticed particularly eye wobbles. And as Dr. E talked a little bit earlier, she talked about these waves that working with clients, and that's definitely something I noticed, and working with them, these waves would come. So you think you're finished something, and then they'd have these waves and something is concluded. I've been working with a particular couple, and these waves are coming, and you think something's concluded, and they have these deeper levels of understanding. And it's eye-brain connected. And as you go through and you stop, the trauma, these spots, you'll see us do this in a little bit, that you stop at a spot, and they'll have these deeper levels of processing. Go to the next one. Okay, somebody do the finger. And so what he recognized is that he held his finger right in her gaze, or you hold it right in the client, in particular at a gaze spot. That when they held their finger there, and as he moved it, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a little as we do some of the setups, that at any particular point in any particular place, that the client maintained that gaze at that spot, that he could get that client to respond. And that if he moved it, that the client might get a different response. And so what he recognized is that he was able to unlock and he could get the client to process something different. So that's going to help us to recognize what's a brain spot. Let's pause just for a second. What we get this, okay. Well, a brain spot, okay. Before we say, what do you think a brain spot is? I got the definition up there. What do you guys think a brain spot is? We don't. What do you think a brain spot might be? We give you a little information. What do you think a brain spot might be? We got a lot of people in here. What do you think a brain spot might be? Any kind of clues?
Don't be shy.
And you can put your answer in the chat box. You can raise your little hand if you want to, or you can go ahead and just unmute yourself and respond.
Good. I see somebody said a window. That's a good one. Okay, go ahead.
Is it
good.
Where a trauma exists and you can recall the memory of it in that spot?
Mm-hmm. 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 Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And we've got some great additions in the chat as well.
I think it might be the spot where the trauma got stuck in your brain, and that, or the area that it got stuck in.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Great, great, great. Okay. Somebody says, you're talking about that. Eye-brain connection, right? Yeah, Dr. E told us something about that. So let's see what the definition, talk about the capsule, unreleasing. So seen as an eye position, right? Somebody said something about the eye. It correlates with the capsule. Exactly. It holds the traumatic experience in the memory. Remember we talked about the memory being trapped, right? It holds that traumatic experience in a memory form. So the eye position, so we come across your eyes, so it's the eye position specific spot, and it's that traumatic experience that's in your brain, so it's in that memory form. Okay. This is just different parts of the eye. When you take the brain spotting training, they will give you this in detail, particularly as you get to 2. They talk a lot about the eye, and they give you the eye and brain. You'll learn a lot about specific parts of the eye and what the eye holds, and they actually give you a great deal about eye positions and brain and what it means and what's connected. And particularly in brain spotting, what we want to do is we want to help you connect to we want to help you connect to some of the deeper regions of the brain that helps you process, where you help you process in the deeper regions of the brain. Yeah.
One thing from the brain spotting training that I've taken and have shared when I introduce this to clients, so it's fairly basic, so that it's accessible to clients, but the fact that our optic nerve goes directly back to our midbrain. It doesn't have to go through anything in the neocortex. So, when we talk about talk therapy, which is still very valuable, but that's all neocortex stuff. That's all understanding, executive functioning, reasoning, logic. That's not where our trauma is. We can be very logical about our traumatic experiences, but that's not how they feel. And so the fact that the optic nerve goes straight back to that midbrain where all the trauma is stored is is incredibly valuable for this approach.
Yeah.
And that's helpful in informing clients, like, why does this work? And that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. Dr. E, that's a great point, because you got to bypass that thinking, logical, rational part of the analytical part of, oh, why all of that. You got to bypass that, because you can get stuck there to get to the feeling part of it. You know, you got to get past that, because we can get stuck there, and we can stay there all along. You guys, we're therapists, you know, particularly us. You know, we can, if we get up here and you got to help them access this part that's deep down, and that part, that's oftentimes you hear clients say, oh, wow, because they're not accustomed. They're like, oh, and it comes in waves. And oftentimes we'll hear them, they'll do that because they're not accustomed to being in that part or accessing that part of the brain, because they're accustomed to being in this part of the brain. And so that wave that comes in, oftentimes I know I'll see them move back because they don't take the time to sit there. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a little bit, about how you get there and what happens in just a second. And so the right brain, the limbic system, and the brainstem, we just kind of just told you guys about. We just really described all of that. We talked about that. It's just that, so I have to redo that. Relational, brain body, between your brain and your body. We talked about that. Mindfulness-based therapy. And so relational, between the connection between your brain and body. And we'll talk about the next slide. I think Dr. E is going to say that. Okay.
Yes. So this relational element, and Dr. Harris and we had a great conversation about this already this morning, about just how valuable this dual attunement element is to this process. So when we're talking about dual attunement, we're talking about this connection between my nervous system as the therapist and my client's nervous system, and the relational, essentially kind of attachment that is happening in the course of this treatment. So part of the treatment is the counselor watching, sensing, feeling what is happening for the client and staying connected with that. So there's really not a whole lot of conversation that happens during a brain spotting session, which can feel very, very strange for most therapists. But in that attunement, as you see in our picture here, you know, the parent looking at the child, that's the same quality that we're looking for between counselor and client. And it's really interesting. That might feel like a small thing. So I'm just like looking at my client, I'm just attuning, and it's much richer than that. Honestly, it's very much your entire body feeling connected to the client. I know with some clients, it might feel like, wait, you're not going to talk to me during this? Well, we're just going to sit here. And explaining to the client, I'm not actually going to talk, because when I talk, it's going to get you into a different part of your brain. But I'm going to be right here with you, and I'm going to be totally attuned to you and very connected to you. So I will tell clients that, so they know I'm not sitting over here checking my text messages. I'm with you. And I'll be, even like sometimes when they're processing, I might be nodding, or I might, you know, I'll have my own facial expressions. So they will, even if they don't notice that visually, they're going to feel that from me, and that's a very important part of this healing process.
Yeah, Dr. E, it is unconditional positive regard times 100. It is, I am in it with you.
Yes.
And I am here, and you know, sometimes I catch myself breathing with them, you know, this leaning in with you. You know, it is my mannerism. It is, I am on the other side, but I am sitting beside you. You know, I am offering support and encouragement. You know, sometimes it is my putting my hand on my heart and, you know, shaking my head. And it is that kind of support that that allows you to walk through and to experience whatever it is that you need to say, to access that deep part, sometimes of what you have never gone through and what you have never, and oftentimes they say, I have never verbalized this. I have never talked about this before. And sometimes they say, I didn't even know that this was there, or because things start to come up, and it's there because, you know, I was, you know, I allowed myself to be there. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. What happens if you say something, you know, if you do something, if you interrupt that process, because we are so accustomed to, you know, this talk therapy part. And we are so accustomed to, you know, what do you think about that? What do you feel? You know, what are you feeling right now? You know, we're so accustomed to, you know, back this dialogue, this back and forth. And it's what Dr. E said. We interrupt their process and we make it about us. And it's not about us. It's about them getting their healing, not the client getting their healing.
And for any of our audience members who are Chicago school students who have gone through residency, think back to when you started practicing the counseling skill of silence. And that's, you know, that's very much what you're practicing here. It feels richer than just being silent. It's all the material that's in the silence. And so even for very skilled clinicians, that can be a hard part of this learning process when you learn this technique. You know, like Dr. Harris was saying, like, we want to get in there and add something, but that's about us. The client does not need that from us in this technique.
Okay, Dr. E. Now you said that, and we were trying to set a question in, but that was the most difficult part of this process for me when I first started out, and I was working with my consultant was, so sometimes when the clients process, and people process in different ways. And so sometimes people process with their eyes. And so, you know, the eyes may have these rapid, you know, fluttering. And so they may not verbalize it. And so I had to become accustomed to, you know, people processing with the eyes, and they may move. And so me, you know, when people are processing with the eyes and, you know, sudden movements, I'm like, hey, what you see, you know, if something's in the room, you know, let me know. Because, you know, like if it's a ghost or something, you know, let me know. And so, you know, whatever it is that they're seeing, because sometimes fear may come in, or they may say, and all of a sudden burst out laughing, or they may have an experience. And so, you know, just let them, whatever it is, sometimes it's need to know. They may not tell me what it is until the next session. And sometimes I have to be okay with that, recognizing that that is about me. And I need to know, and that sometimes I have to sit. And so what I had to do literally is sometimes sit on my hands. And we have this thing, why am I talking? You know, and the other thing is, why am I talking? And then WAIT, we have this. And then the other one is, why am I troubled? So why am I troubled? And this need to want to talk, this need to want to interrupt. And so if I'm wanting to interrupt, then there's something internal about my process and my need to know. So what happened to me to want to interrupt, to want to get in their stuff? And so that I need to explore that, of why I need to rescue or say something.
Yeah, that's so valuable. That's a really great insight. And then just a great plug for, and then we go get supervision and consultation, right? And that's a big part of this approach as well, is being part of the Brainspotting community, where we're doing group consultation, one-on-one consultation. There's always kind of lunch and learns. It is very much a growing professional community that wants to support each other and kind of be there when we notice this stuff coming up, and maybe we're not sure what was that about, or here I got triggered in the session, or I just noticed that this is what I'm wanting to do while the client's processing. So this dual attunement is, I mean, I just feel like it is so multi-layered in this approach, because yes, of course it's happening between you and the therapist, but then we can see it on this broader scale between the whole community. That's pretty
Our
cool.
next presentation might just be on dual attunement. You know what I'm saying?
It might be. We are clearly
We could do a
passionate
whole
about that.
presentation on dual attunement.
So this also speaks to just a foundational philosophy of this approach that we observe everything and assume nothing. And that speaks to, and it's a good reminder when we're wanting to jump in and interpret or say, what was that? Or that must have been that, is to say, no, like just observe. You don't necessarily know what's going on, but you know it's supposed to be going on. That very intuitive, really trusting the nervous system, which is something I love about this approach, that our nervous systems are built and designed to be able to do this. Trauma trips us up, but our nervous system is never wrong. And so being able to trust in that and help our clients trust in their nervous system, which you can imagine when a client's been traumatized, they do not trust their nervous system at all. They might be having panic attacks, nightmares, flashbacks, relational disruptions, and they might really be blaming all of that on themselves. If we can kind of help them with this philosophy and have us sit in this philosophy to just observe and assume nothing and trust the process. There we are again with our favorite phrase in this program.
So often, Dr. E, what I'll say is the clients will say, well, you know, what do you think about da, 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 or this and da, 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 da. They say, what do you say? And I say, it is your truth. You know, whatever it is your truth. You know, I'm not there to, you know, make any assumptions about your truth. You know, you process what your truth is, you make meaning of that. So it is your truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just again, the power of the attuned therapist and the mindful therapist. So following the lead of the client, one lesson of this approach is thinking about the client like the head of the comet, kind of shooting across the sky, traveling wherever they're going, and we are following. So we are not really ever leading this process. You know, we might be doing some psychoeducation when we set it up and introduce it to clients, but once the client is in their processing, we follow wherever they go. So they might say, today I want to work on the death of this person I loved. And they might start getting into their process, and it might feel like it goes somewhere else. Because even though we are not asking questions, the client might be reporting on what's happening. They might be saying, oh, now I'm in this room, or now I'm seeing images of this, or now I'm feeling, you know, a wave of heat. And so we aren't there to say, well, this is why, and this must be connected to that. We are just saying, okay. And we just follow along wherever it goes, and wherever it goes is where it needs to go, because it's all connected, and the brain will bring forth whatever needs to be processed in connection to that original issue that was identified. So we've got two models of brain spotting, the activation model and the resource model. When we talk about the activation model, this is, and I really love this language as well, because it's pretty neutral. It's not like the triggered model or the traumatized model, but our nervous system does activate when it's feeling overwhelmed, or when we're going to that fight or flight kind of state. That's our activation. So with this model, we're noticing the client's activation paired with the issue and paired with the brain spot, or, you know, that eye gaze. Dr. Harris, do you want to say anything about that model as well? I know we're going to go into it a little bit deeper coming up. Okay. So in this model, this is where we're going to notice clients feeling more intense. They might be feeling stress, anxiety, pain, heat, tears. We use the subjective units of discomfort scale in this approach. And so this is going to be a higher score on that. So we use 0 to 10, you know, 10 being the most upsetting or difficult, 0 being neutral. So the activation model is looking for those higher scores and utilizing those.
This is usually I will say this is usually the model that if clients come in, they'll start out with that model, and that's the model that they usually, people are coming in, that's the model they go to. This is the model that we usually have to teach and say, hey, let's try the resource model. Have you ever thought about the resource model? This one works also. And that you go from this place of calm and groundedness. And then you go and you talk about the active, while the body's activated around the issue. So this one often is a model that they don't think about this one,
This this one, even this week, I've actually been spending more time with this one for a lot of my clients because they have complex trauma. It is very chronic, very multi-layered, relational. Like it's much more challenging to pick a single issue and process that because everything is connected. Their whole history is connected to these chronic traumas. And so what I was finding this week is that a lot of my clients, when we started with the activation model, too overwhelming. It was to the point where they're like, we got to stop, which we always trust the client. We can stop whenever we want to spot, whenever you want to stop. So what we did is we shifted to starting with the resource model where we have them actually get grounded. And so there's a spot when we're looking for those brain spots. There's the activation spot that brings it all up, but there's also this resource spot that helps you feel very calm. And it's like, there's no activation here at all. So we engage that spot while we bring up the very difficult material. And it's an important way of keeping the client grounded while they're still doing the processing. So yeah, that's just an important. Go ahead, Dr. Harris.
No, I was going to say, when we talk about a resource spot, we basically would say, tell me a spot where you're feeling calm and grounded in your body. So I would ask, Dr. E, can you tell me a spot right now where you're feeling very calm and grounded in your body? And she might, where would you tell me, Dr. E? Where are you feeling right now? Where are you feeling very?
Where I'm feeling very grounded, actually in my knees.
Okay. And she'd tell me, so if you're feeling very calm and grounded, so if I had to ask you right now, very calm and grounded on your knees, and on a scale of, and so usually what I'll do is I'll even ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, I even get a suds there. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you feeling on the suds, where would you get that?
I would put my knees at a 1.
Okay. And so we would operate from that.
Nice.
From that level. That's how I know the
Nice.
issue. We talk from the issue. Okay.
So like we were saying through that, the brain spots can be matched with either where the body's activated or where the body's resourced. So like my knees, or if you had asked me where am I activated right now, I would say in my back. And I guess in my chest because my hand went right here. So I'm gonna trust that my back, and my chest. Yeah. Okay. So with this approach, we're just looking to engage the parts of the brain that are important for this regulation and reprocessing, and skip the parts of the brain that aren't. So like neocortex, we don't need the neocortex in this process. So we're just gonna skip right over it. Okay, Dr. Harris.
Yeah, and basically with this, we just basically, like we said before, the eyes are the window to the soul. And so we're paying attention to eye movement. And so basically with this, there are 3, and Brainspotting 1, there are 3 techniques we basically use, something called outside window, inside window, and gaze spotting. Outside window and outside window, the brain spotting therapist observes a client's eyes while tracking microsoli, looking for reflex responses without the client's awareness or active participation. So with outside window, and Dr. E, just as certainly as I said it, I think I put my pointer down.
I have mine here if we want to use it.
You got yours? Okay.
I got one. Yeah.
Okay. You use yours. And
Okay.
so basically what she would do is she would pull a pointer out and, oh yeah.
So it's a little easier to see. Yep.
And she would track my eyes, and so basically she would move it very slowly across, and so kind of without my awareness. And so what she's looking for is looking for.
Yep. So I'm looking, and I'm, oh, there's a blink. There's a blink. There is a little purse of your lips. And I won't be saying this out loud to the client while we're doing it. I'm just noticing it. There's a movement on your mouth there. Change in facial expression right there. Your head's nodding. I'm noticing fewer micro expressions over here so far.
So quick question, Dr. E, let me ask you this. How would you decide when you go back through? How, and process, and how do you go back through and decide which one that you're going to, when you're on the outside window, how do you go back through and decide which one that you're going to,
it might depend on the client for me, and I'd be very curious to hear what you do as well. But if, so for when we were doing that, I noticed more blinking for you over here. So if this side continued to be pretty calm, then I would slowly move it back. And I'd go back to, and I'd still be watching to see, okay, did we just miss anything, or is anything going to show up? I'd slowly come back over to where I'm noticing the blinking again. And I might just, for some clients, I might just hold it and just say, okay, just let's sit in this spot and notice what comes up. Or I might say, how does that spot feel to you? Which kind of gets into inside window a little bit. So it kind of depends on what I think the client needs and what our relationship is like. If there's a lot of trust already built, then I might just say, and let's hold it here. If we need to kind of build some more of that collaboration, I might just say, you know, how does it feel to hold it here? What do you notice here? And let's hold it.
So
what do you do?
I'll do the same thing. So as I scan across, I'm paying attention. And like you said, I will go across. Then if I notice if it's not on that side, slowly I'll come back and I'll stop. And then usually, you know, I'll start paying attention to the facial movements. And sometimes when you hit that spot, you know, you'll know because, you know, their face, and you saw what usually they'll start crying or something will, you know, often it's a cry. It will just, and sometimes, particularly with men, they'll say, something's in my eye. They'll say, so I don't know, or they'll say, something's going on. They got glasses on. They'll say, something's going on, you know, I don't know what it is. And something is going on. And I'll say, just sit with that. You know, just sit with that. Just rest in it. Just, you know, just hold that for a second. You know? And so, but and she started, you know, because she's seen it. Because as soon as you hit it, and if you stay there, or you know, usually it's within a vicinity, you know, like maybe 2 or 3 spots. But as soon as you hit it, you'll know, boom. Because before, you know, they would have discussed what they're there for, and then you scan it, and then once you get that spot, like within that area, you know, something will happen. So they will have a response. Okay.
And then we just hold it there. And they do the
and whatever comes, and like she said, whatever comes up for them, you know, you let it go. She talks a little bit about outside window, you know, what you pay attention to, the body shift and all of that. Let's see, we can get through a couple more.
One thing just on that one as well is sneezing and coughing. And that for me, when I'm doing brain spotting, when I'm the client, that happens to me. It's so funny. And the first time that happened, I'm like, I don't know if that's a thing. And so, you know, we kind of kept going and came back to it, and I sneezed again in the same spot. I'm like, okay, like that's it.
It is a thing.
We'll just go with it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead to the inside window.
Yeah. So inside window, and that's a felt sentence. So that's where you're really paying attention to the client. And so with the inside window, you participate together and you locate it together. Now, we may not, I don't think we'll have a chance to do all of them, but we might have a chance to do this one. So as she's scanning through, she's going through and she's asking me, you know, kind of talk about the issue. Okay, it's there. And she's asking me like, where am I feeling it the strongest? And she might say here, here, or here. Boom, boom, boom. Closer left, middle, right.
Right. So we might go quicker. We might do. Do you feel it more over here? Do you feel it more in the center? Do you feel it more over here? And then, well, it seems like it's kind of over here. Okay, so then we might do some micro movements. Okay, and then let's say the doctor here says, "Ooh, I feel it right there."
Oh yeah.
Then I'm gonna check right there. Okay. Do you notice more activation if I move it up? If I'm back to center, or if I go down? And we'll bring in the y-axis.
Yeah. Go up a little. Yeah. That right there. Point I want to make about this. If you think, and holding it, so two things that, if you think slight movement of variations in that spot won't cause your client to say, oh, you moved it, they certainly will.
Yes.
They will tell you, oh, you moved the spot. They will notice if you move it like a centimeter. They're like, oh, you need to move it back up. They will notice it. And they will say, oh, and because like sometimes you after holding an hour, and you know, so usually you have to get pretty creative with it. Some people have cans, or you know, you learn to rest it on your knee, but your clients will notice when you move that, and so you have to become pretty. You have to have a steady hand, you know, but you have to come with creative ways, because if you move that pointer, if you move that brain spot, because it's, remember we told you it's a specific spot that the brain that they have, and so they will know that brain spot. They will often, if you move it even a centimeter, they will say, oh, you got to come at that, and you know, you really have to be in tune and attune with it.
That's so true. Yeah.
The third one is usually the most natural one. And this is what people catch themselves doing. This is most natural, and I catch people doing. And then too, some people are, sometimes people may be threatened by the pointer. And I know for me, initially, culturally, gaze spotting, when I first started working with clients and I started talking about the pointer, you know, clients were like, oh, what? And I bought out, you know, threatening, I bought it out. They were like, what is that? You know, like, what are you doing? You know, because, you know, Harry Potter-ish, you know, it was like, you know, folks are like, I don't know about that. And so, you know, so it was a lot of trust and rapport. Now, the ones that knew me, they were okay. But then, you know, I work with a lot of different type of people. So they were like, I don't know. You know, I just ain't gonna do it. And so for the ones that were threatened, this gaze spotting, you know, you naturally catch people like gazing. And so it's, hey, stay there. Can I get you to stay there? And so at that fixed spot, at that fixed moment, and then once you get them at that fixed spot in that moment, can I get you to stay there and tell me, you know, what's coming up for you? That's more natural. And for some of you in the CMHC program, you've seen me demonstrate that one a couple of times. Because generally, when I try to do one of the other ones, sometimes they'll start gazing. And sometimes that's what you'll notice, that you might start with one and then they may start gazing. And or something may be too painful. I think what Dr. E was talking about earlier is that you may, you know, something may be, you know, too difficult or too deep processing. You may have to switch to another one. And so you might find yourself having to do that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no turf when it comes to healing, you know, with that.
I really liked this. Dr. Harris put this slide in. I love it so much because when we talk about all the different theories and models and research that's out there, and we know that this approach came out of EMDR, and people can find very strong loyalty to their approaches. And what I love about the brain spotting is that it's not about that. It's, if EMDR works, fantastic, keep using it. That's always a resource for us. It's always a tool for us. And we have this one too. It's not about coming in and saying, we are the only trauma treatment that you can use now. This approach can be integrated into any theory, into any other approach. It's not about kind of coming in and taking over the world of trauma treatment. It's, here's another resource that really works. So I love that attitude.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, I know the uncertain principle. Well, so I think we're going to give questions, and I want to say one thing in particular before, as we get ready to transition to ask questions. I want you to know that particularly this model, I was very skeptical of it, and particularly my initial training was with Dr. Graham, and he had assembled a group of 80 clinicians, BIPOC clinicians from throughout the world, from BIPOC clinicians throughout the world. And so I told him, I don't know if this works. And so what he did is he made us believers that it would work. And so what we did is he made us, we invested in the training. I got 1, 2, and then I did 3. Then I became certified, and then I became a consultant. And now I work and do some training with consultation with a number of therapists, and I participate in some of the trainings and help train other clinicians in it. And so what we did is we invested our time and our energy to train over, our goal is to train over 1,000 clinicians, particularly BIPOC clinicians, within 2 years. We're very close to that goal. And yes, remotely, yes. That's what we're doing now. And we're training 1,000 remote clinicians, and I use it remotely, and it is and have used it face to face. So yes, you can use it remotely. A number of clinicians, another one, my consultant, she also gives out a scholarship. So I wanted to say that. Any other questions you guys might have, we're willing to speak to them. You guys can type them or let us know.
And also for the question about training, I would just go to brainspotting.com, and there's a whole list of trainings that are available both virtually and in specific locations. Both Dr. Harris and I did our training with the same folks. I did it because Dr. Harris recommended them. They were fantastic, and I did mine completely virtually. And it was great.
Thank you, Grace.
Yep, it can totally be integrated with other modalities. I absolutely do that.
Yes, and this technique can be used with insurance-based clients. They tell you how to use it. They give you the verb. They tell you all of it. Yes.
And to Leanne's question, yes, I'm much more aware of my own body now. Because that needing to be, and this goes into the dual attunement as well. When clients are coming in and processing trauma, whether it's with brain spotting or whatever modality, their nervous system is dysregulated. So with the dual attunement, your nervous system is going to be the regulator for both of you during a session. So it's so critical that you are able to regulate your nervous system so that you can hold that space, a very safe, grounded space, to let the client kind of do their thing to get more regulated, but you're going to be the regulator for both of you. So paying attention to what kind of state you're in before and during the session is a very important skill. And being able to get grounded during a session, if you get triggered or if you're distracted or whatever, having those techniques that you can go to.
Yes. So David, so ironically, you can actually obtain the training while you are students. Often there are students that are in the training. I will say this, the training is intense. Dr. E will definitely tell you that. And they will monitor you, and you get feedback during the training. And it is emotionally, I know for me, it's emotionally intense. And also there are other people, like their nurses, coaches, often they're also in the training, but now they really push for therapists to, I know Cynthia's a number, but it's generally made up of clinicians. There are a number of clinicians that participate in training.
But you can use this.
Yes.
Yes, you can practice Red.
Yes.
I've only done level 1 so far.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. So, and I'm using it. So I'm also cautious I'm cautious, especially with my very complex. I won't use it with my clients with DID. I'm not using it with some of my human trafficking clients because I know that I'm going to get that training in some of the later sessions. And I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself in a way that I might harm the clients if I'm not specifically trained in that yet.
Shani, you don't have to have any EMDR to do brain spotting. That's not a requirement. I think it's just a lot of EMDR therapists have been used brain spotting. A lot of them just kind of have taken that training. Is what we find. There have been some studies. I heard someone in one of the fewer training, one of the last training, asked about dementia and Alzheimer's.
So with EMDR, and Dr. Harris, maybe you can address how old developmentally can we use this with kids? That's something that I don't know, and then I'm happy to address the EMDR question.
Okay. Okay, I know they have, there is a training that they do with children that are 3 and 4. So in that training, they offer it, there's one that's coming up. Now, I don't know if there's anything any younger, but I know that particular training is one that they do, and they offer it at least like quarterly.
And for the difference between EMDR and Brainspotting, I would say they're rooted in the same brain-based neurobiology, but with EMDR, the key element is the bilateral stimulation. So accessing, stimulating your right brain and your left brain, your right brain and your left brain. And that is seen to help kind of modulate the reprocessing, just like when we're dreaming, our rapid eye movement back and forth. That's what EMDR is simulating for the processing. With Brainspotting, it's not necessarily seen that is the only key, but finding that fixed eye gaze. You can add in some audio though that goes back and forth that can facilitate the processing, which is pretty cool while you're holding the eye gaze. So that's a very simple answer to that question. Oh, interesting, Alina.
Yeah. Elena, I like that. Shotgun. To tell David that when I'll see him next week.
Well, and to the point with the ice skater, and even in my own practice, I did EMDR with a client for many years who found it very helpful, and really felt like she processed the traumas. And we started with the Brainspotting just this week, and it was like, whoa, where did all this stuff come from? And it's not that the EMDR didn't work, because it did work, and the client still states like it totally worked. But where was all of this stuff when we were doing that? And so it does seem like it gets deeper, or that shotgun effect maybe, has a variety of connecting points. Great questions, everybody. Thanks for the participation. Okay, well, I know we're coming to the end. Thank you, Tina.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it can absolutely be combined with other modalities, as many of you are saying.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
Great.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. It was a pleasure.
Consultation, someone, hey, Susie, it's so good to see you. Or so great to, oh, and hey, Frida. So brainspotting.com, if you want to know information. The great thing about it, someone asked about risk, consultation, you have consultation, you know, you seek feedback, you know, always doing that. So we appreciate you guys coming out. So great to see everyone. Enjoy your day and have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Friday.
Yes.